season 4, episode 6. Child, we in it. We in it. And let me tell you something. I'm not gonna lie. I really am having way too much fun watching conservatives realize for the first time that they are not the good guy in this. And when I say for the first time, that's the shocking part, because this is the 4th season. Y'all just getting it? The little hand occupation from the Nazi didn't do. Okay, y'all, do you think? Anyway, moving on, y'all. And this is episode 6. All right. So, I just want to say, I'm so sorry, Huey. I really hope that y'all had intimacy coordinators and stuff for whatever you was going through, because I wasn't okay. But anyway. Okay. So, now, season 4. Episode 6, let's just get to it. So we got Kessler and Butcher back in this terrible bunker with this very poor one-legged Dr. Samir, who had 2 legs in our last episode, okay? And he's saying, Butcher is saying, so listen, we've already going to give you some time so you can go back to work, Mr. Hopalong. And in the middle of his premeditated torture, like, Butcher gets this terrible headache and coughing fit, and we realize, like, Butcher's still dying. So we switched to Huey and his mom, who was emptying out all of the ashes from his father. And of course, I guess his father was like in love with Made in Manhattan, so they were actually doing the Made in Manhattan tour, even though that was such a terrible movie. And his mom asked Huey if he was okay, and he says yes. And his mom turns around and looks at Kimiko, who's like low-key emotional. Honestly, low-key emotionally dying. Let's be clear. And says, "Is she okay?" And he was like, "Nah, she's not okay." Frenchie turned himself in for multiple murders because he used to work for this Russian mob boss, but she's really more upset he didn't talk to her about it first. And she was like, "Who the fuck are your friends?" Which is the normal reaction to hearing something like that. Of course, Starlight and everybody is also on this procession march. And of course, some random man just decides to start screaming abortion is murder while staring at her. And I'm going to be perfectly honest. In real life, I'm sorry. This is why I could never be famous. I could never be famous. Because I'm going to beat that ass. I am. And this is even if I lose. This is not even like, oh, you can't punk me, blah, blah, blah. No, it doesn't matter. I could end up a bloody lump on the floor afterwards. Just know, I'm going to fuck you up. I'm leaving with something. I'm going to bite off an appendage. You're going to miss it when I'm gone. Okay. So, we switch to Kimiko going to the jail, asking again to see Frenchie. But, of course, they're telling her inmate refused visitation. So Kimiko's just sitting there lost. And I'm just so sad for her right now. And also kind of upset with Frenchie. We then switch to Firecracker, who, of course, has taken over for James Cameron, who I'm pretty sure got beaten to death in the last episode. No, I'm sorry, he didn't. But in her words, was just taking up a very sudden sabbatical. And, of course, that means that she's now taken over for his show. And as she opens the show, she says, our first question, is our Jewish space lasers brainwashing you into joining shoals? The fact that any conservative really thought that this was, like, nuanced. Anyway, we switched to MM trying to listen to meditation audio, and of course this is interrupted by a very frantic call from A-Train, who is in Toronto, so nobody can hear him, I guess, and is telling Mother's Milk that they killed Cameron last night because they thought he was the leak. And that A-Train's not stupid. He knows that Homelander and Sage are looking at him, and honestly, I feel like this black man's whole run has completely, child, we not gonna see you in season 5. And it makes me sad because I hated you all this time. You wait until the 11th hour to grow a heart. I can't stand your bitch ass already. So anyway, of course MM was going to try and calm him down, but let's be perfectly clear. As MM explains later on to everybody else, we are completely fucked. And apparently we see that Homelander has been completely shaping this whole world like he is going to, be these gods of wrath, like an army. And they decide the best way to get into information is to infiltrate a Federalist Party that is being hosted by Tech Knight. And this is just basically like a conservative right-wing cocktail party. Let's just say it like that. So Starlight is saying, we may actually need Butcher. And MM is like, you know what? I don't remember the last time I spoke to him. So now the question begs how we're going to infiltrate this thing. So I believe MM he's pulled up a picture, MM does, and it's of a person named Web Weaver. That's what happened. So now you know. The next thing that we're going to do is go try and get Web Weaver. Excuse me. So we're knocking on Web Weaver's door, and this man gets to the door, and when I say he just looks like a glaze of funk. A glaze of funk. You know what I'm saying? Like, it seems sebaceous. I don't know. But there was something, like, ooh, soap. Soap will remedy this. So of course, he pushes his way inside the room. And obviously, this is like some kind of fake drug deal that they're doing. And I also just want to say, before we even get into the scene, Laz Alonso, if that's what your name is, you fine-ass black Cuban man, okay? You don't deserve the abuse they be doing to you on this show. They've thrown so many things that look like at you. They have. It's always some kind of splat or just missing the splat. And it's so gross. They had a whole man wrap his phallic member around your neck and try and choke you out. You should feel abused, okay? And I'm tired of them doing you like this, okay? Are you married, baby? Anyway, so now, like I said, he goes in, he's gonna go give Web Weaver a syringe of something, some type of drug is what we're doing, right? Okay, cool. So he goes in with the syringe to go give him like his drugs or whatever, and it needs to be injected. And when he drops his pants, I just want to be very clear. There's a starfish above the starfish, if you get my drift. And the stuff that was leaking out of the first, anyway, so he tells MM to insert it, and of course MM at first is like, nigga, are you out of your fucking mind? But, you know, he ended up doing it, and tell me how this man, like, farted, and it was just like a little... It's not right. It's not right. But anyway, whatever the drugs had in it knocked Web Weaver out, which is exactly what we needed. But anyway. So now we switch to the party. Homelander and his son walk in. It's a lot of gracious claps all around the room with Firecracker, Sage, and A-Train just trailing behind them. And Homelander starts schmoozing with one of the politicians as Tech Knight comes in to say that he is so happy to have him there and all of the suggestive brown nosing that comes with that. And Homelander is like, hey, Sage, I may need you right now, but you and I are not... Oh, no, sorry. He says not to Sage. He says to Tech Knight, I may need you right now, but you and I are not equals. You can't even fucking fly. And of course, Tech Knight has no choice but to swallow all of that, glug glug. And then suddenly Ashley comes walking through the door, and Sage walks right up to her, and she's like, what is it about that you're an idiot child and you cannot play at the table of adults so you don't understand? And Ashley, of course, is like, Tech Knight and I go way back, a.k.a. he licks my butthole. So we switch to Tech Knight, who has been completely eviscerated by the most formidable white man in the room, Homelander, of course. And because he's like licking his wounds and he needs to get back, so he's talking to Firecracker and A-Chain. He begins by telling them, like, listen, you don't get this much money from just having a TV show. This is generational money. I come from a long line of slave catchers. I don't know why when he said that, the first thing I thought of was Benedict Cumberbatch. Listen, it's true. Anyway, so after he says he comes from a long line of slave catchers, I guess he decided that it's also the right time to make direct eye contact with A-Train, you know? And I was like, Jesus Christ, what, like, you just want to make sure you drive this shit all the way home, writers, huh? And then, of course, Tech Knight is like, now we own more private prisons than anyone in the U.S. And again, very much still holding deep eye contact with A-Train. And it says, I catch and rehome criminals, and then I catch them all over again. I've been, I bet A-Train here would have given my great-great-granddaddy a run for his money. And I was just like, and I've been into some severely racist situations. But that's interesting. Okay. And of course, Adrian's like, I guess we'll never know. And I'm just like, oh, I hate that you've been given this step and fetch it fucking role. Oh my God. Anyway, so we switched to Huey, who is now in Web Weaver's getup that he says smells like ass sweat and broken dreams, which I can only imagine. And that explains why, and of course, Tech Knight's, all of his senses, like this is a superpower, all of his senses are super exaggerated. So, super smell, super eyesight, super whatever. So, guess it's really good that he's under a funk of, ejaculate? I feel like I would have just picked a different costume. But okay. So, at this point, Webweaver is, now Webweaver, Huey, is completely in the party, and he's gotten his glass of champagne that he obviously cannot drink because he's got a whole fucking mask on. Huey, what are you doing? And then he goes around the party and just starts putting the bugs everywhere, and I'm just like, man, if only there was a way for you to do this and just get out, but that's not how shows work. Because remember, those are the bugs that we're going to listen to surveil, because Newman's going to be there, all the people are going to be there. So Newman also walks in and goes straight up to Huey, who she thinks is Webweaver, and she's like, oh, this is a truly ripe scent you've got on, which also makes her think, well, obviously nothing is wrong, this can't be Huey, or at least she's just thinking, oh, you're a gross human being that I don't want to talk to. She goes her own fucking way. And next thing you know, Tech Knight comes right up to him because he is apparently about to take Webweaver to a special party downstairs, which means this is going to be terrible. That's what that means. So as Huey goes on this horrific tour, Sage talks to Newman about what they're really here for tonight, which is to have Sage and Homelander talk to the 1% of the billionaires, you know, the 1% of the 1%, and convince them to basically stage a coup so they can have a 25th Amendment, which would legalize having soups in the army. And I'm just like, well, Christ. Okay. Now, as we go back to the tour, right, now we're going down a creepy elevator behind a bookcase, and I'm just like, oh, Huey, I really wish that you could have put on some tin panties or something, because I feel like something terrible is going to happen. Like a tin panties with like a lock and key kind of shit. And so the getter is quite the dungeon, and it is filled with lots and lots of sex toys. And Tech Knight's black butler, of course, who was just hosing down the ground, which makes me think either it's a lot of bodily fluids or blood. Either way, it's gross, and I don't want to be here. And he then starts to yell at his own personal Jeffrey and tells him that he didn't clean off the Santorum off the gilded cage. And I was just like, hold on, I gotta look at what Santorum means. And I really wish I hadn't. I'll leave it at that. Anyway, oh gosh. So then there's also a man in latex, red latex, attached to the wall who's got a gag in his mouth, and he seems to be struggling pretty hard. And he's chained to the wall. Then Tech Knight, because all of his senses are sort of exaggerated, is noticing that Huey's heart sounds like it's about to fall out his chest, and it's like, what's wrong? And Tech Knight is like, you know what, I understand. Everything in this room is very vanilla. I feel like when he said that, that's when I was like, oh, you should be real scared. You should be real scared. As a person, oh, no, oh, I hear that, and I'm just like, this is vanilla, run. But we're definitely going to get down to the nitty-gritty, and I'm literally looking at 20-inch dildos. I'm sorry. Anyway, listen, we're looking looking at things that are not for human insertion. And he says, tonight we're going to push ourselves to the level. And I was like, oh, Huey, they need to hurry up and find you immediately. Oh, which, by the way, another thing I didn't say, they had like a little walkie-talkie that he was talking to the rest of the team with. And as soon as Tech Knight takes him on this tour, that shit's cut all the way off. We then switch to the 7th Tower, where Deep and Black Noir are having a conversation. Obviously not the Black Noir from last season, because he's dead. This one is actually super talkative, and he's really upset about not being able to find the motivation for his character. So the Deep actually has this whole conversation with him about how he's supposed to feel powerful from violence. And I just want to say, this is not the PBS tagline that I wish. And I just wish they would stop saying anything like this, because this whole, like, listen, if you just kill people, you'll feel powerful and nobody will ever talk shit to you again. And I'm just like, what in the mass shooter reasoning is this? So anyway, we switch back to the party, our party crashers, for a second, where we see that Newman and Sage are once again talking amongst one another when Newman is having a conversation with a politician asking about if there's a way to find out if rape is legitimate so they can start nationwide abortion bans. And it sound familiar? And then she walks up to Sage. This is when she starts having the conversation. And they start talking a little bit. And Sage finally said a little bit more about herself and her life. And she talks about how her grandmother was an ailing ex-Black Panther who was dying of cancer. And of course, Sage, as a child, stayed up for 3 days and actually discovered a cure. And then once she told the fat crackers exactly what she had done, they patted her on the head like she was an idiot, and her grandmother died screaming in pain. And of course, Newman is like, why are you telling me this? And Sage is like, because you know what it's like to be a little girl that no one fucking listens to. Sage is like, I could reverse global warming. I could cure cancer. But what's the point? Humans are animals. Sage, I can't disagree that humans are terrible people. But I feel like you forgot that you were amongst the people and you too are a terrible person. Or maybe you know and don't care. Because I actually feel like, never mind, she knows, she just doesn't care. Never mind. All right. We switch to Firecracker being the epitome of white trash. She walks over to Sage, Newman, and now Homeland, and she starts talking about how amazing the endless shrimp is, and Sage responds, don't you have some Sunny D and Everclear to chug? This is kind of an adult-friendly conversation. And of course, Firecracker walks off to go cry. Sorry. Someone actually asked where Tech Knight, the host, is, and no one seems to know. And the reason why is because Tech Knight is downstairs, where there is now being brought down a very beautiful German chocolate cake. I've never had it, but it always looks really pretty. Tech Knight is now being strung up against a big, long chain. Like he's leaning against the chain. He's chained to the wall. And now he's trying to relieve himself while he wants Huey to put his bare ass on this chocolate cake. And then he put it on, so he put it on the cake. And then Tech Knight was like, now fart. And I was like, oh, this is different. Oh, this is different. This is different. This ain't no regular shit. This is like fart. Okay, and listen, also, farting on command, I find that a very scary skill, because how do you trust a fart? When farts have been historically untrustworthy, how do you trust a fart? I would never. It's fine. So, I guess Huey finally figures it out, probably from fear. And Tech is like, that's the most amazing thing in the world. Because this is what he really wanted. And then, suddenly, freaky-ass Ashley comes downstairs. Tech Knight relieves himself, and releases himself from his David Carradine-like bonds. And then he tells Huey to clean up, and the butler hands him some sandpaper. Okay. I wanted to say, I'm not sure what's going on behind the scenes, but like I said, psychologists, intimacy coordinators, this was absolutely horrendous. And I think that Dennis Quaid's son, I don't remember what your name is, sir, you're very talented. You ain't got to do all this. I don't really feel sorry for white men like this. And I'm like, oh, are you okay? Like when they said cut, did you have like a person to go to? Anyway, we switch back to Butcher, who is in this lair, and he's keeping Samir in. And Kessler walks up to him and says, "Man, you look like warmed up shit." And Kessler said that Samir is obviously a tough nut to crack, which is somewhat admirable. But Butcher says he'll crack. He's got to, ain't got no choice. And none of us have one right now. And then Kessler says, you know, the hardest part about coming home from that terrible tour in the Middle East was actually coming home. All of a sudden, I'm having Applebee's with my wife and helping my son with homework, and all I could see was the tortured faces of the men that he killed, that I had to kill. I always thought, had to. Okay. He said he couldn't square up who he was at home with the shit that he had done. And Kessler said he realized that the guy who was eating boneless chicken wings and watching Sports Center wasn't him. But the real me likes to hear them scream. Who's the real you, Butcher? And I'm just like, I'm glad they're not going the way of the comics, because I could never have watched the show if they did that. But at the same time, God, we switch to Huey, poor Huey, who's now being strapped up to a sex table, and he's strapped down in doggy style. And Tech Knight says, as soon as the party is done up there, they'll also want to come down here and play with you too. But you know, Tech Nine gets to have his fun first. Then Ashley comes in behind and starts tickling his feet in quite the dominatrix outfit. And then she says, I am going to sit my swollen so-so on your masked face and piss like a skunk, and I just had asparagus. Hey, yo. So then she starts licking his feet. I just want to let you know, I have such a huge problem with feet. I was so skeeved out during the scene. I have such severe issues. And he was at the point where he started screaming uncle, and then Tech Knight says, oh, don't worry about all that. Remember, if he wanted us to stop, he would say the safe word. I feel like at this moment my heart sank. Because I know there's no way he knows the safe word. And I don't want Huey to be impaled on something. So Ashley is tickling his feet and stroking herself and saying, ooh, it's getting swampy down there. And then he just yells tarantula, and all I can say is, I'm so sorry, Huey, because you know, this nigga looking at everything. He's going to be like, Toshiba! Like he did. I felt so bad. So now Firecracker, we switched to Firecracker, who's crying in the bathroom. And she comes out and she runs into fucking Starlight. And now Firecracker is like, I should call up Homelander so you can laser your fucking tits off. And of course Starlight's, listen, I'm not here for you. I promise. And I'm not going to try and beat you up again. Immediately, Starlight tries to apologize. And of course, this bitch is like, don't you dare try to apologize to me. And she was like, what are you going to say? Is this because that wasn't you, right? And Starlight's like, no, that was me. And I did that. Yes, it was orchestrated by my mother for me, but I did that to you. And in fact, I did it to plenty other girls because I was trying to win, and that was the only thing that was told to me that was important. This doesn't mean that you weren't an absolute cunt for what you did to me, which she was. But I am sorry for my side of things and what I did. And then she stabs Firecracker in the neck with some kind of thing that puts her ass right out, which I was just like, good job. Now, switch back to Huey, who is, Ashley is still torturing and tickling Huey and whatnot, and she has obviously gotten her climax. Tech Knight tells her to go back upstairs and replenish her fluids, and before she leaves, she wipes her very wet, swampy hand all over Huey's face, and Huey asks at this point, after all of the quote-unquote fun they had, if we can get back up now. And Tech's like, yeah, sure. But I just want to know before I get you back up, what's the safe word? And he was like, oh. So obviously, he doesn't know the fucking safe word. He tears off the mask. And I'm like, this is going to be so fucking awful. And Tech Knight's like, this is going to be so great. Not only will I get points for capturing you, but I get to basically have a little fun first. And he takes out a long tray of metal instruments and starts saying, man, it's so sad. Everybody's always got the same holes. Nigga. So now we obviously get the feeling that just natural orifices is not going to be enough for Tech Knight. And he says, I just want to do something fun, and I just want to make a new hole, and fuck it. Okay, so we switch to MM and Kamiko, who just walked in, who just walked in trying to find this trapdoor to wherever Tech Knight is holding Huey. And Sage literally runs up on them, right? And of course, MM has got the gun out, and Sage is trying to do her best to get to a space where she can actually call Homelander. And MM, who by the way is starting to have a panic attack, just ends up shooting her in the head. At one point, I'm like, oh, well, at least she's dead. Because I love you, Sage, but we see what side you're on, right? Everybody's kind of just awful. But let's also remember, her brain's the one thing that can regenerate. All right, cool. Anyway, MM Kamiko gets A-Train from the party, and of course he takes MM to the hospital. That's just what he does. And honestly, when he ends up taking MM to the hospital, there's this little boy there who was looking at him like a hero for the first time, and it wasn't glitz and glamour and just something that was so contrived and something he was just supposed to do. And I felt like for the first time, like, A-Train actually felt like a hero for real. And that's why he's not going to make it to season 5. So, now, we switch back to downstairs where Huey is spread out on an X on his back, and now we are taking a scalpel, and apparently we're now going to make an extra hole for Tech Knight. And as that happens, thank God, Kamiko and Starlight get downstairs, and Kamiko just Sparta kicks that nigga off, Huey, and now we are trying really hard to get him off of the table. Again, I hope there are therapists nearby. A-Train, and like I said, I already talked about the part where A-Train drops off the kid. Okay, now we switch back to where Homelander is actually talking to Sage, who, you know, as we already know, talked about the last episode, her brain regenerates, blah, 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 blah. So, because she got shot in the head, and remember, she likes a little lobotomy so she can enjoy, like, you know, a little backdoor pleasure and some, and what was it, Taco Bell? So now, that her brain is a little scrambled, she really wants to be able to go for a crunch wrap and a Sibian. I had to look that up. I wish I had not. Well, I can't say that. Anyway, so Homelander now realizes that Sister Sage is going to be absolutely useless. So we have to remember that no matter what we can say about Homelander, he still is an absolute idiot, right? He's super powerful, but he's dumb. So he thinks that he can make a good speech and nobody will push back and actually ask questions. So he's in the room with all of these politicians to possibly see if we can make this whole 25th Amendment where Supes can be a part of the army a thing and we can convince this to happen. So he starts talking about, and he realizes really quickly it's not gonna work. But he starts talking about how we're fighting the transgender illegals, and all of these millionaires are just gonna fall in line behind you. And one old lady was like, "Save all that boogeyman shit for the idiots watching the news station. How are you gonna handle the Justice Department? Military reaction, the OPEC." Let me tell you something. This is when you realize that Homelander was always just I think we've always seen it, that Homelander was always just going to self-implode. But just seeing him being questioned and him not being able to handle it even in the slightest was, I'm not going to lie, it was a little crazy. It was a little crazy to watch. I didn't expect. I mean, like I always expect it because it's fucking Homelander. But seeing how, like, even in this moment, I was scared for everybody in this room. Like, if he doesn't like you, or you just can't agree with him, he'll just kill you all. All right. So anyway, thankfully, Sage, obviously, again, she's just stuffing her face with cake. And I'm very glad that Newman comes up and saves the day. She gives a snazzy-ass speech talking about how the masses are stupid and nobody wants to actually put choice in the hands of the people because we're so dumb, so let's ruin the world and continue the dark side of mayhem that we've been doing all this time. Whatever. And all of a sudden, all the people in the room are on Homelander's side. And I will say that Newman is making herself such an asset to Homelander. And I wonder if it's going to be him that takes him down or it's going to be Newman. Because as far as I know, she's the only other suit that is even close to his type of power. Yeah, I want to say that. I don't think there's anybody else as strong. Because she's basically indestructible. Anyway, so we switch back to the secret sex lair where Tech Knight is finally the one strapped up on the X bed, okay? And he's standing, as of course they have him like stood up, and Kimiko is trying to do a little torture, and it's not going to work on Tech Knight because he likes everything. Ooh, stab me again. Take a piece of skin out. Like, he's going to be like, this is fun. So, how do we torture a masochist? And soon the gimpy gentleman, who was in the red latex outfit with the gag, actually gets loose from the wall. He like releases himself from the bonds, goes directly to Tech Knight's computer. Tech Knight's like, get him, go and tell on them for me. And this man just grabs the computer. So, yeah, he logs into this man's computer and you see all of Tech Knight's bank accounts. And you realize, and all they need is a retinal scan. So they, of course, like scan it. And they're like, listen, you need to tell us what's going on, or we're just going to start sending your money other places. So we spent $40 million to Elizabeth Warren and $65 million to the Innocence Project. And Tech Knight calls Starlight a skunk pussy bitch. That tickled me. I don't know why. Anyway, movies, and he was like, are you ready to talk? And he's like, eat a dick. And he's like, you know what we should do? $100 million to Black Lives Matter. Oh my God. He's like, okay, not those people. I'll talk. Anyway, so he says, they made me a deal to use my prisons to house all of the dissidents. I don't know what else. And he's talking about internment camps. That's what he's talking about. And before we know what's happening, good old Black Jeffrey comes up behind Tech Knight and decides he's going to choke him the fuck out. And nobody makes an attempt really to stop him. And he says, or at least not a good one, and he says, I've raised this entitled piece of shit since he was a boy. I listened to him moan about his career. I cleaned his cum out of too many goddamn holes to count. But prison camps? No. I'll make it look like an accident. And he says he always admired David Carradine. These three do not need to be told twice. Everybody skedaddles. But before he goes, Black Jeffrey, the butler, says the safe word was actually Zendaya. So we switch to Mother's Milk, who we realized didn't have a heart attack, definitely had a panic attack. And then we switch to Kimiko, who is back at the precinct trying to see Frenchie. And nobody says, and nobody, of course, the inmate doesn't want to see anybody. And I realized that, man, Frenchie is the closest thing to home for Kimiko. And I think that's why everybody is looking at this as so fucking cruel. Yeah, this is just cruel. So we now switch to Homelander, where, he's staring, looking like Kermit, looking out the window. Firecracker comes up to him and says, he says, where were you last night? And she says, well, Starlight was at the party last night. I chased her outside, but the bitch got away. And I was like, girl, you ain't chasing nobody. That was cute, though. And she's like, Tech Knight's dead. And I'm pretty sure Starlight had something to do with it. Starlight and friends had something to do with it. And of course, Homelander is like, oh my God, Cameron wasn't the leak. And she was like, well, either Sage is lying to you or she's fucking useless. And I was like, well, damn. And to her, and she says, Sorry, he says to her, so you let Starlight get away. And I was like, oh. And she just goes on this whole spiel how she's so grateful to him, and it was just a little off-putting until, never mind, it was just really off-putting, but she tells him that she did some stuff to herself, which may have caused a little bit of an enlarged heart, but she shoots some breast milk at his face, and this man's like, I'm sorry. Listen, by the end of the episode, he is in her lap, and she's like, "Yes, I know you like." Yeah. Anyway, so we switch to where Starlight and Huey are listening to the recordings from the bugs inside the crazy sex party they had left, and now Huey starts crying because guess what? He's not fucking okay. And after last night, why would he be okay? Is the better question. I'm like, Starlight, you gotta drop the ball. Did you see what you just rescued him from? As a person who's also been assaulted, why would you think that this man is okay? But okay. Oh, and then also, I just want to say, sidebar, if we are hearing that Anthony Starr, the one who plays Homelander, is kind of Homelander-ish. Apparently he's like liking racist tweets, and there's people on set that are afraid of him and shit, and I'm just like, oh no. That's unfortunate. Unsurprising, but still unfortunate. Anyway, now for the absolute ending scene, so we have Butcher who is trying to get all of the items together for poor Samir to go ahead and start making his soup pandemic, and he actually starts to not only argue with Kessler, but he starts to argue with his wife, who we know for a fact is in his head because she's dead. Of course, she is trying to be his conscience, saying that Starlight, Kamiko, Ryan is going to die. You are literally doing this so you can save Ryan, and now you're making a global pandemic that you know for a fact is going to kill him. And Kessler's like, hey, just hurry up and torture this dude so we can get our shit together, and we can kill all of the soups and start our own mini genocide. And Samir is like, if I make this, my wife and daughter are both soups. If I make this airborne, I'm basically calling for their death. So you're just going to have to kill me. And the separate arguments between Butcher and his imaginary wife and Kessler continuing, and finally Kessler tells his wife to shut up, and Butcher's like, wait, because this bitch I know is in my head. And we realize Kessler is just as imaginary. Kessler is a hallucination. I'm like, Butcher, like, this is something that Butcher is imagining. It's one of the things that Kessler said. I know that this is what you want to do because I'm literally in your head. I know exactly what you want to do. And Kessler is basically the manifestation of his cancer, as far as I'm concerned. Kessler's like, you never pulled me out some war-torn country. You left me to die. I'm in your brain, and I'm the one who killed Ezekiel for you. I am the beat-up tumor. And I'm just like... And that was the end of episode 6. I'm going to be uploading both of these videos, hopefully sometime today, so that... well, 3 of these videos, but I think I'm going to do 7 later on so I can upload that as well. But anyway, love y'all. See you guys in the next one. I'm going to be way more consistent on here.